Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a pretty big topic, actually. It's the headwinds facing China's foreign trade and e-commerce.
Hmm.
We've all heard about how global economics are kind of reshaping the country's world's factory status. But today, we're really going to dig into that, and we've got some fascinating insights from a recent article that I think you'll find pretty interesting. And to kind of get us started, did you know that just like tweaking a little tiny policy tweak could send shockwaves through major platforms like Temu and Shine?
Yeah, that's right. It might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a symptom of much larger forces that are at play right now.
Hmm.
And to really grasp the potential impact of that, we kind of have to rewind a little bit and go back to the U.S.-China trade war.
Ah, yes, the trade war. It's not exactly ancient history, is it?
No, not at all.
We've seen tariffs on some Chinese goods just skyrocket. I mean, up to like 35% in some
Hmm.
cases. And of course, China's not just sitting back and taking it. They've retaliated with tariffs of their own and also some strategic controls on tech material export. So it's a bit of a standoff.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean in practical terms?
Well, Bloomberg is predicting a potential 40% drop in Chinese exports to the U.S.
Whoa.
And that translates to almost a 1% hit to China's GDP,
Wow.
which essentially wipes out a year's worth of economic growth.
That's huge.
Yeah, imagine, if you will, the ripple effects globally if China's economy slows down that much.
Yeah, that's not even a ripple at that point. That's a tsunami, right?
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how would something like that actually affect, like, what we see on the shelves at, Target or even on Amazon? Like, would prices jump? Would certain products just be harder to find? Like, how would that actually play out?
Yeah, those are definitely possibilities.
I know.
And it all comes back to, China's reliance on this low-cost production.
Yeah.
And it's been their winning formula for decades, right?
Yeah.
Flooding the market with these affordable goods.
Right. I mean, everybody I know practically has something made in China in their home.
Exactly.
But now that strategy is facing a backlash, is it a case of the world saying, hey, wait a minute, the rules need to change?
You could say that Chinese products have undeniably undercut industries in Europe and the U.S.
Right.
And that's led to a lot of accusations of unfair competition and calls for a more level playing field.
So it's almost like a David and Goliath scenario, except in this case, David is asking for a rule change, like in the middle of the fight.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's be honest here. How many big-name Chinese brands can you really think of? Especially compared to the likes of like Apple or Gucci.
That's a key point.
Right.
China's really known for quantity, not necessarily brand recognition.
Right.
And now they're dealing with rising costs from production to logistics, and it's really putting the squeeze on Chinese businesses. You add in those tariffs, and you've got shrinking profit margins, potential overcapacity, and a real risk of layoffs.
So it's a tightrope walk for a lot of these businesses.
Absolutely.
And speaking of shifting ground, we're seeing these global manufacturing hubs. They're moving away from China. U.S. and European buyers are eyeing places like Vietnam and South Asia. Like, I remember reading that story about Mr. Hong, a Chinese manufacturer, who actually moved his entire production line to Cambodia just to sidestep the tariffs.
Wow.
Is that becoming more common?
Absolutely. It's a trend that we're seeing across a variety of industries.
Wow.
Take textiles and apparel, for example. U.S. imports of these goods from China are down, and profit margins are incredibly thin.
And that decline in imports and stuff, that sends ripples through those local economies in China, right? I mean, those export-heavy regions like Guangdong and Jiangsu, they must be feeling the pressure.
Exactly. Those areas are packed with factories that rely on these international orders. And if those orders dry up, you're talking about factory closures, job losses, and entire communities that are struggling to make ends meet. It's a human cost that often gets overshadowed by all the economic headlines.
Right. It's easy to forget about the people on the ground when you're looking at these big numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. How is all this affecting specific sectors? It's like a chain reaction, isn't it? One thing leads to another, and suddenly you've got this whole cascade of consequences.
Hmm.
Speaking of ripple effects, we keep hearing about these protectionist policies. Are those actually playing a role in all of this?
Absolutely. They're a major factor.
So what does that mean? Like, are we going to see more tariffs and trade barriers around the world?
Precisely. It's a trend we're seeing not just between the U.S. and China.
Right.
Countries like India, Vietnam, even Russia are implementing tariff on Chinese goods.
Wow.
It really signals a shift away from those free trade agreements.
So does this mean that China's reign as the world's factory, is it coming to an end?
It's facing its most serious challenge yet.
Okay.
And to understand why, we need to look at a concept that economists call false economic prosperity.
Okay, false economic prosperity. That sounds kind of intriguing, but also a little bit ominous. What does that mean, like in simple terms?
Imagine a system that's built on razor-thin profit margins, relentless competition, a constant pressure to produce more for less.
And it's worked for them for a long time.
Right.
I mean, they've become this economic powerhouse, but you're saying that it might not be sustainable in the long run?
Exactly. The pressures that we're seeing now, they're kind of exposing the vulnerabilities of that model.
Okay.
When you have these external factors like tariffs and rising costs, it starts to show cracks in the system.
So if low-cost manufacturing is becoming less and less viable, then what's the alternative for China? Like, what's their next move?
This is where things get really fascinating. These challenges that they're facing could actually force China to evolve,
Mm.
to shift away from just churning out these cheap goods and move towards developing, higher quality products.
Mhm.
It could be the catalyst that they need to really push for innovation and technological advancement.
So instead of being the world's factory floor, they become like the design studio.
Exactly.
But that sounds like a massive undertaking.
It wouldn't be easy for sure.
Right.
It would require a complete shift in mindset,
Hmm.
a willingness to invest heavily in research and development, and really commit to building brands that have that global appeal.
So are we talking about a future where instead of, China being known for low prices, they become known for high quality, cutting edge technology, maybe even luxury goods?
Exactly. Imagine Chinese tech gadgets that rival Apple, or Chinese fashion houses that are competing with the likes of Gucci.
Wow.
It's a long shot, but the potential is there.
Yeah.
And these challenges that they're facing right now might be the push that they need to reach that next level.
It's almost like they're being forced to play a whole new ball game.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules are totally different.
Right. It's not just about making things cheaply anymore.
Right.
It's about quality, innovation, brand recognition,
Mm.
creating products that consumers around the world actually want and seek out. Not just because they're affordable, but because they represent something unique and desirable.
We've covered so much ground here.
I know.
We've gone from tariffs and trade wars to this potential transformation in China's economic model. I mean, it's a lot to think about.
It is.
But, we've focused a lot on the economic and political side of things.
Yeah,
There's another really important dimension that we need to consider.
absolutely.
And that's the human side of the story, because ultimately it's real people whose lives are being affected by these massive changes.
Yeah. Behind all the statistics and economic indicators, there are millions of workers whose livelihoods are at stake.
Right.
And their stories often get lost in this bigger narrative
Yeah.
about, trade agreements and economic indicators.
Right.
But their challenges are real, and we need to acknowledge them.
Okay. So let's take a deep breath and shift gears a little bit. Let's focus on the human side of these global trade challenges and really explore the impact on the people and communities that are caught in the middle of all this change. So we've talked about tariffs and trade wars and all this, shifting in the manufacturing landscape. But let's bring it back down to earth a little bit, to the human element, Behind all these economic forces, there are individuals and communities whose lives are really deeply intertwined with these industries.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in, the data and the big picture trends. But, we can't lose sight of the fact that real people are being affected by this. Their stories often get hidden, beneath the headlines about trade agreements and all the economic indicators.
Absolutely. I'm thinking about those workers in China's manufacturing heartland, places like Guangdong and Jiangsu. They've built their whole lives, their livelihoods around these factories. So what happens when those factories close and those jobs disappear?
It's a question that really resonates throughout history. As industries evolve and technology advances, certain types of jobs just become obsolete. We've seen it time and time again, from blacksmiths to switchboard operators. It's a natural part of economic progress, but it often leaves workers behind, struggling to adapt.
And in China, the scale of this is just massive. We're not talking about a few hundred or even a few thousand workers. We're talking about potentially millions of people facing unemployment and real economic hardship.
The magnitude of it is staggering. It's a huge social and humanitarian challenge that requires, careful consideration and proactive solutions. Governments and businesses need to work together to create safety nets and provide retraining programs and really support workers through this transition.
Yeah, and it's not just about finding them new jobs. It's about equipping them with the skills and resources they need to thrive in this new reality. They need a pathway to build a new future for themselves and their families.
Exactly. And this isn't just a China-specific issue either. As manufacturing shifts to other countries, we need to ensure that those new production hubs are prioritizing fair labor practices, safe working conditions, living wages. We can't just shift the problem from one place to another.
Right. We have a responsibility to advocate for ethical and sustainable practices throughout the entire global supply chain. It's about making sure that everyone benefits from economic progress, not just a
Well,
select few.
ultimately, it's about recognizing the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah.
You know, our choices as consumers, our actions as citizens, our values as human beings, they all play a role in shaping a more just and equitable global economy.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive. We started out talking about tariffs and trade wars, and then we kind of went down this rabbit hole of, China's economic model and the potential for transformation. But most importantly, I think we've shed light on the human stories at the heart of all of this. So I hope this leaves you, our listener, with a deeper understanding of these issues and a renewed sense of responsibility for creating a better future for everyone. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.